Here's what I saw the night Jeffrey Epstein was found dead, and something didn't add up. I wasn't online guessing. I wasn't a fan. I was assigned to stand post, silently watching Epstein in his final hours. Whispers about secrets, high-profile visitors, and masked men arriving in silence. It all made me question. Was it really suicide? Or something far darker? What really happened behind those locked doors? Hit subscribe if you dare to uncover the truth with me. I arrived at MCC NYC for my night shift, assigned to Epstein's block. The hall was silent, officers tense but careful. I wasn't here for drama or gossip. I stood post, watching Epstein. He sat calmly, eyes moving slowly around the room. Even at first glance, I could tell he wasn't like the others. There was awareness in him, a calculated presence that made everyone act differently around him. Epstein didn't acknowledge me directly, just observed. Guards whispered among themselves, careful not to be overheard. I noticed subtle glances, small gestures, the way they moved cautiously around him. It wasn't fear exactly. It was respect or maybe unease. I kept my distance, silent, recording everything in my mind. He knew things, secrets, and it was clear, even to me, that this night wouldn't be ordinary. Rumors of a confidential visitor reached my ears. Epstein's eyes flicked toward the hallway repeatedly, calm but deliberate. He wasn't nervous, just aware of every movement, every approach. Guards shifted slightly when he moved, careful not to cross invisible boundaries. I realized quickly this wasn't about punishment or protocol. It was about something far bigger, something I wasn't supposed to see. A black SUV pulled up outside. Security clearance was tight. Donald Trump entered, quietly but firmly. Epstein rose smoothly and greeted him. There were no loud words, no theatrics, just subtle tension radiating between them. I stayed at my post, trying not to breathe too loud. Every gesture mattered. Every nod was a signal. I could feel the air thicken with stakes. No one spoke aloud, a silent conversation of power. They spoke quietly, measured, each word carrying weight. Epstein's posture was calm but precise, like a man testing, bluffing, or measuring the visitor. The visitor's expressions were subtle, almost unreadable. I noticed the shift in body language, the slight tightening of a fist, a glance too long to ignore. I understood. Whatever was happening could change everything beyond these walls, yet I was powerless to interfere. After the visitor left, Epstein returned to his seat, adjusting his posture as if replaying the meeting in his mind. Guards whispered quietly, some avoiding my gaze. I noticed how he studied every face, every reaction, like a man weighing who could be trusted and who couldn't. Even from a distance, I could feel his awareness. It wasn't fear or arrogance. It was control. He knew the stakes, and I felt it too. Epstein's calm was almost unsettling. His eyes occasionally flicked toward the hallway, anticipating, calculating. Guards moved subtly, adjusting their steps. Radios checked quietly. I realized the tension wasn't loud. It was in the gestures, the pauses, the things left unsaid. I stood at my post, watching, knowing I was witnessing something no one outside this room could ever understand. Guard whispered under his breath, "If anything leaks, it could ruin a lot of people." Epstein didn't react outwardly. His fingers folded, posture steady. But I could see the understanding in his eyes. He wasn't worried about himself. He was aware of what his knowledge carried and what it could mean for the powerful names connected to him. I felt a shiver run down my spine, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was seeing. Minutes passed in tense silence. Epstein occasionally adjusted himself, leaned forward, glanced at a door, back to his seat. Small things that would seem meaningless to others carried heavy weight tonight. Guards moved cautiously, subtly checking positions. I realized that even standing there, I was part of a scene most would never see. The air was thick with anticipation, secrets, and the quiet sense that something irreversible was about to happen. The block felt paused. Epstein's eyes never left the hallway. I continued observing, quiet, my heart steady but aware. Every movement from him, every subtle shift in posture, seemed intentional. It was as if he were playing a game where the rules were invisible, and I was the only witness. Nothing loud happened, nothing overt, but the tension was palpable, pressing in, and I couldn't look away. But what really happened when the lights went out for a brief moment? And why did Epstein never flinch? Epstein shifted slightly, his eyes still scanning the hallway. Guards moved with calculated precision, each step quiet but deliberate. I noticed the smallest gestures, an eyebrow raise, a hand brushing a paper, a glance toward a camera. Everything was measured. I stayed at my post, trying to remain invisible, yet every movement and look in that room felt like it carried, meaning I wasn't meant to fully grasp. A guard whispered something to another, barely audible. This could go wrong fast. Epstein didn't react, not outwardly. His calmness contrasted sharply with the tension around him. I realized that whatever knowledge he had the island, the visitors, the secrets was enough to make people act cautiously, even nervously. And here I was, just a witness, watching everything unfold without interference. Time stretched. Epstein leaned back in his chair, folding his hands, eyes moving from guard to guard. He wasn't nervous, but he was fully aware of every detail. Even the smallest shift in posture or glance meant something tonight. I understood that I was watching a man who had power without saying a word, influence without raising his voice, and knowledge that could terrify even the most confident people. A clerk opened a side door slightly, letting in a subtle draft. Epstein's eyes flicked toward it, calm, calculating. A subtle nod passed between him and one of the guards. I noticed the interaction, but couldn't tell its meaning. Every tiny gesture seemed loaded, deliberate. I stayed silent, heart steady, recording it all mentally, knowing this night would stay with me forever. Epstein straightened, fingers intertwined, posture perfect. Guards moved around him cautiously, almost reverentially. The air was charged, but nothing loud or obvious happened. Even small things, like the angle of a glance or the subtle tightening of a hand, felt critical. I realized that tonight, everyone was watching him, not the other way around, yet he controlled it all with his calm, measured presence. And then the night took a turn no one expected. What happened when the block went dark, even for a few seconds? A brief power cut plunged the block into darkness. Nothing screamed, nothing moved dramatically. But I stayed at my post, heart steady, watching shadows shift slightly. Epstein didn't flinch. His calm presence dominated even the dark. I noticed the subtle clicks of guards adjusting their positions, radios softly crackling. The silence was heavier than any sound could be, and I felt the weight of what was about to happen. Lights flickered back on. Epstein was in his cell, composed. Everything seemed too normal. I noticed small irregularities, a slightly ajar door, a misplaced chair. Guards moved with an unusual efficiency. I realized something had changed, though outwardly nothing had happened. Something about his posture, the way he observed the room, told me the night was far from routine. He sat silently, folding his hands again. I observed the subtle way he scanned the hallway, almost anticipating an event no one else could see. Guards whispered quietly among themselves, careful not to meet my eyes. The tension in the room wasn't loud, it was in the small movements, the soft exchanges, and the way Epstein carried himself as if he already knew the outcome. A sudden knock at the door made the guards tense slightly. Epstein's gaze shifted only for a moment, steady and calm. The visitor or messenger was brief, almost invisible. Yet every small interaction tonight felt heavy. I noticed the silent communication between Epstein and a guard. Subtle nods, gestures, nothing spoken, but loaded with meaning I could only guess at. Time dragged slowly. Epstein's composure remained unbroken. I stayed at my post, heart steady but alert. Every glance, every adjustment, every tiny breath he took seemed deliberate. It was clear he was aware of risks that others were blind to. I realized I wasn't just observing a man in prison. I was witnessing someone holding dangerous knowledge, knowledge that could destroy powerful lives if revealed. But when the guards found him the next moment, nothing made sense. How could someone so alert, so aware, just disappear? Epstein shifted slightly, eyes flicking toward the corridor as if expecting someone. Guards moved around him carefully, each step deliberate. I noticed subtle exchanges of glance here, a slight nod there that spoke volumes without a word. He wasn't nervous. He was calculating. I stayed silent, recording everything, aware that I was witnessing a night that would never be fully explained. Minutes passed in quiet anticipation. Epstein adjusted his posture, subtly leaning forward, then back again. The guards whispered softly, checking logs, adjusting radios, avoiding my gaze. I realized every small gesture mattered. The room felt frozen in tension, like it was holding its breath. And I was the only one watching every detail, understanding that something irreversible was about to unfold. A subtle sound of door creaking made guards tense slightly. Epstein's eyes shifted, calm but precise. I could feel the weight of his awareness. Even the tiniest movements were deliberate, signaling observation, caution, and calculation. I stood at my post, heart steady, knowing that nothing tonight was accidental, and that what I was witnessing would leave questions no one outside this block could answer. Epstein returned to his seat, folding his hands again, calm and collected. Guards moved around the room quietly, efficiency masking unease. I noticed how even small details, the tilt of a head, a subtle gesture, held meaning tonight. It was like watching someone play a game invisible to everyone else, and I was a silent witness, seeing the rules unfold in real time, realizing just how dangerous knowledge can be. A quiet murmur passed between two guards. If anything leaks, it could ruin everyone. Epstein didn't react outwardly, but I saw the understanding in his eyes. He wasn't worried about himself. He knew what he carried, and it scared even the strongest men in the room. I realized that I wasn't just observing a prisoner. I was witnessing a man whose secrets had the power to destroy lives. And then it happened, the moment no one expected. How did Epstein's night take a turn that left even the guards frozen? The night dragged on. Epstein remained still, calm, but every now and then his eyes flicked to the doors, measuring, calculating. Guards whispered softly among themselves, each gesture cautious. I stayed at my post, quiet, observing. The block felt frozen, as if everyone and everything was holding its breath. And I knew that the moment we'd all been anticipating was creeping closer. A sudden clatter echoed somewhere down the hall. Guards stiffened, adjusting their positions instantly. Epstein didn't flinch, didn't even glance. I noticed the subtle tension in the room rise, the way a single sound could ripple silently across every person present. His calm presence seemed to absorb the fear, but I could tell that outside that composure, danger was closer than anyone admitted. Minutes passed. Epstein's posture remained perfect, composed, deliberate. Every subtle movement tilting his head, brushing his hands together, seemed meaningful. Guards were quiet, almost reverent. I realized they weren't reacting to him. They were reacting to what he represented, the knowledge he carried, the secrets tied to names no one dared speak aloud. And I was only a silent witness to it all. Then, the lights went out briefly, plunging the block into darkness. A brief, ordinary blackout, but tonight it felt heavier. I stayed at post, heart steady, eyes straining. Epstein didn't move a muscle. Guards adjusted positions quietly, but I could feel the weight of anticipation, like time itself slowed. That darkness, that fraction of a second, felt like a signal that something irreversible had begun. Lights returned. Epstein was still in his cell, calm, composed, as if nothing had happened. But small details caught my attention. A door slightly ajar, a chair out of place. Guards moved efficiently, but silently, hiding any trace of alarm. I realized something significant had occurred in those few seconds of darkness. Something the world outside would never see, and I alone had witnessed the subtle truth of that night. But when they came for him, nobody expected who would arrive, how quietly and how deliberately they acted. Suddenly, 4 men in dark suits arrived, faces covered with masks. They moved with precision, silent steps echoing faintly. Guards stepped aside, no questions asked. I stayed hidden at my post, heart pounding, watching. Every motion was deliberate, practiced as if they'd done this countless times. The air felt heavier, charged with secrecy, and I realized what I was witnessing was not ordinary. It was orchestrated. They reached Epstein's cell without hesitation. One guard unlocked the door, barely moving. The masked men entered, their presence commanding absolute attention. Epstein didn't resist. He remained calm, almost resigned. I could see the weight in the room shift, like gravity had changed. Every gesture, every step, spoke of a plan executed with meticulous precision, and I could only watch in silent disbelief. They lifted Epstein's body carefully, moving with efficiency and purpose. No sounds, no discussion, nothing to hint at the enormity of what they carried out. Guards watched quietly, almost reverently. I realized this wasn't just a removal, it was a concealment, a secret no one was allowed to know. From my hidden spot, I witnessed the quiet but absolute power these men held, and the finality of what had just happened. The body was placed in a plain, nondescript vehicle parked just outside the block. The men in masks vanished as quickly as they came, leaving only silence and whispers. Guards adjusted themselves, trying to return to normal, but the tension remained palpable. I stood still, absorbing it all. No one acknowledged me. No one questioned anything, yet I knew I had seen something that the world would never be told. Minutes passed as guards quietly resumed their routines. Yet the room felt different. The presence, the weight of secrecy, lingered. I reflected on Epstein's calm, the visitors, and the masked men. Everything pointed to one truth. His knowledge, his secrets about the island, the visitors, the powerful, was the reason for tonight. And I had seen it all, standing at my post, silent but fully aware of the dangerous knowledge just removed from the world. And as the night ended, I couldn't shake the question. Who else knew? And who had decided that no one could see him leave alive? I remained at my post long after they left. The block returned to a superficial normal, but I knew the truth. Epstein's calm, his knowledge, the visitor, the masked men, all of it weighed on the room. Guards whispered quietly, avoiding eye contact. I realized I had witnessed something the world would never see, a secret carefully removed from sight, leaving only questions and shadows in its place. Sunrise came. Life outside the block carried on as if nothing had happened. I left my post, heart heavy, memories vivid. Every glance, gesture, and whispered word from that night replayed in my mind. Some nights you leave alive, but the memory doesn't leave you. I knew what I had seen would haunt me forever, and the world would never know the full story of what happened in Epstein's final hours.